video in a playlist. I am trying to talk to you about Herman Melville Mardi. This is a sailing adventure that I couldn't put down. Today is already May 26th, and I really have been at it all month practically, and I really had to fight myself to put it down because I didn't want to put it down. But I think I got the most I can get out of it right now, but it is every sentence is just jam packed. I learned a lot of words. Uh, it's from 1849. It's called Mardi and the Voyage Thither. It's back from Mardi. AI was very helpful in this allegorical Polynesian fantasy. Anyway, these people on a whaling ship decided to get off the whaling ship and chase down a girl. And this adventure leads them through all these islands which represent real places. So I'm just going to talk to you about, in no particular order, one of these islands that they visited was called Damanora. And it represents Great Britain. It's ruled by warlike imperialist King Bello. The Damanora stands for the British Empire, referred to as Old England, and dominance, historical dominance. King Bello represents the British monarchy and government, characterized in the book as an aging and robust ruler who controls many seas through his humpbacked navy and fleet. Here's a direct quote. This is a wonderful sailing adventure, flat Earth, because they're following the Southern Crux like across in the sky. Here's a direct quote. Now, Vivenza is another island that they visit to, and Vivenza is an allegory for America. But free Vivenza, is she not the star that must ere long lead up the constellations, though now unrisen? No kings are in Vivenza. Yet, spite her thralls, and the land seems more good than elsewhere, our hopes are not wild dreams. Vivenza cheers our hearts. She is a rainbow to the isles. A truth it is that in Vivenza they have prospered, but thence it comes not that all men may be as they. Are all men of one heart, brain, one bone, and sinew? Are all nations sprung out of Damanora's loins? Or has Vivenza yet proved her creed? Only the years that prove a man prove not a nation, but 2 kings have reigned. 2 kings' reigns have passed since Vivenza was a monarch. Her climacteric is not come. Hers is not yet a nation manhood, even though now in childhood she anticipates her youth and lusts for an empire like any czar. You may judge not yet the time tales to tell. Many books, many long chapters are wanting to Vivenza's history, and when history is but full of blood. There stop, my lord, said Babylonja, nor aught predict. Fate laughs at prophets, and all of the birds, and of all the birds, the raven is a liar. Here's another quote. While slowly the night wore on, and now scudding clouds flown past, revealed again the host in heaven. Few words were uttered save by Media, who, when all the others were most sad and silent, seemed but little moved or not stirred a jot. But that night he filled his flagon fuller than his wont, and drank, and pledged the stars. Here's to thee, old Arcturus, to thee, old Aldebaran, who ever poise your wine-red, fiery spheres on high. A health to thee, my regal friend, Alpha Ca, Alpha Ca, in the constellation of the crown. Lo, crowned crown, I pledge thee, I drink to ye, O Alphard, Marcab, Denbola, Capella, ye too, sailing Cygnus, Aquila, soaring all round, all health to your diadems. May they never fade nor mine. At last, in the shadowy east, like dawn, a grave distant sail before the wind was descried, drawing nearer and nearer till a glided prow was perceived. And in the tropic gales the wind blows fierce and more fierce with the advent of the sun. So with King Media, whose mirth now breathes afresh. But at sunrise the sea storm only blows harder, to settle down at last into a steady wind. Even so, in good time, my lord Media came to be more decorous of mood, and Babylonja abated his reveries. Herein, said Babylonja, have many distant tribes proved parricidal. In times gone by, Louisiana hither sent her prom, Franco her scores of captains, and the dikemen their peddler host, with yardstick and spears. But thou, O Bello, lord of the empire lineage, Noah of the moderns, sire of the long line of the nations in germ, thou Bello and thy locust are the present curse of Orenda. Down ancient streams from holy plains in rafts thy murdered float. The pestilence that thins thy armies here is bread of corpses made by thee, Moramba's priests. Thy pious heralds loud proclaim that of all pagans, Orienda's most resist the truth. Vains all pious voices that speak from the clouds of war. The march of conquest through wild providences may be the march of the mind, but not the march of love. Thou Bello, cried Yumi, thou wrest the crook from Alma's hand and place it in a spear. But vain to make a conqueror of him who put off the purple when he came to Mardi, and declining mitres entered the nations meekly on an ass. O curse of Camus, cried Babylonja, that it barters souls for gold. Bellow with opium, thou wouldst drug this land, and murder it in its sleep. And what boot thy conquests here? Send sow by seers, but seldom springs, and harvests reaped thereby are poisoned by the sickle's edge. I had to look up its genre. I loved it so much. Its genre is allegorical romance and philosophical fantasy. Talks about this archipelago of Mardi, allegorical quest, the island's satire, the 19th century politics and religion and society of the different places. It serves as a dreamlike odyssey focused on metaphysics, morality, and the search for absolute truth. It retains the elements of the South Sea travelogue, an adventure story. There's another quote. These regions we passed, we came to savage islands, where the glittering coral seemed bones embedded, bleaching in the sun. Savage men stood naked on the strand and brandished uncouth clubs and gnashed their teeth like boars. The full red moon was rising, and in long review there passed before it phantom shapes of victims, led bound to altars through the groves. Death rattles filled the air, but a cloud descended, and all was gloom. Again, blank water spread before us, and after many days there came a gentle breeze, fraught with all-spicy breathing, cinnamon aromas in the rose-flushed evening air. Like glowworms glowed the islands where the incense burned, sweet isles of myrrh, crimson groves. Woe, woe, your fate, your brightness and your bloom like musky fireflies. Here's another quote. For old Jove gave suppers, the god Woden gave suppers, the Hindu deity Brahma gave suppers, the red man's great spirit gave suppers, chiefly venison and game, and many distinguished mortals besides. Ahasuerus, now I've seen that word before, no, that's King Xerxes, but Ahasuerus gave suppers. Xerxes gave suppers. Montezuma gave suppers. Powhatan gave suppers. The Jews' Passovers were suppers. Pharaoh gave suppers. Julius Caesar gave suppers. The rare ones there were. Great Pompey gave suppers. Nabab Crassu gave suppers. Heliogabalus, surnamed the Gobbler, gave suppers. It was a common saying of old that King Pluto gave suppers. Some say he is still giving them. If so, he's keeping tip-top company. Old Pluto, emperors, tsars, great Mongols, great khans, great lamas, great dukes, prince regents, queen dowagers, Tamerlane hobnobbing with Bonaparte, Antiochus and Suleiman the Magnificent, Pisistratus pledging Pilate, Semiramis eating bonbons with Bloody Mary and her namesake of Medicis, the 30 tyrants quaffing thee to one with the Council of 10, and sultans and satraps and viziers, hetmans, soldans, landgraves, bashaw, dogas, dauphins, infantas, incanas, and caciques looking on. Again, at Erebel, the conqueror of conquerors, conquering the son of Olympia by Jupiter himself, sent out cards to his captains, Hephaestion, Antigonus, Antipater, and the rest, to join him at 10 p.m. in the temple of Belus, there to sit down on a victorious supper off the gold plate of the Assyrian high priests. How majestically he poured out his old Madeira that night, feeling grand and lofty. The Himalayas, yeah, all Babylon nodded her towers in his soul. So you can see why it took me like a real long, I took my time with this book because there's so many words that like I never heard of before. Okay, so Dominora is the island nation that allegorically represents the British Empire. The name itself is a deliberate wordplay on the dominion of King Bello, who rules the land as a stand-in for the British monarchy. Dominora is a major power in the archipelago of Mardi. It is characterized by white cliffs, its long imperial history, and powerful military. Melville uses Dominora as a vehicle to critique the 19th century British colonialism and its foreign policies and its relationship with the colonies, such as Veranda, which represents Ireland. A central element of Dominora narrative is its complete rivalry with Vivenza, an island that represents the United States. Through the lens of the two nations, the book comments on the geopolitical and ideological tensions between the Old World and the New World. And it explores themes like slavery, industrialization, and expansionism. Here's another direct quote. O fettered sons of fettered mothers, conceived and born in manacles, cried Yumi, dragging them through life and falling with them clanking in the grave. O beings as ourselves, how my still arm shivers to avenge you. 'Twere absolution for the matricide to strike one rivet from your chains. My heart outswells in its home. Oro, art thou? Cried Babylonja. And this thing does exist, it shakes my little faith in turning upon the knoll. How can ye abide to sway this cursed dominion? Peace, fanatic. Who else may till unwholesome fields but these? And as these beings are, so they shall remain. It's right and righteous. Merama champions it, I swear it. The first blow struck for them dissolves the union of Vivenza's veils. And the northern tribes well know it, and know me, said Medea. Yet if, no more, none other word, the king art thou shalt be dungeoned. Here there is a law that thou art not among the northern tribes, and this is freedom, murmured Medea, whose heaven's own voice is throttled. And these were serfs, to rise and fight for it like dogs. They would be hunted down by her pretended sons. Pray heaven, cried Yumi, that they may find the way to loose their bonds without one drop of blood. But hear me, Oro, were there no other way, and should their masters not relent, all honest hearts must cheer this tribe of Hamo on. Though they cut their chains with blades thrice edged and gory to the haft, 'tis the right to fight for freedom, whoever be the thrall. These south savannas may yet prove battlefields, said Moe gloomily as we retrace our steps. Talks about, it's definitely a fantastic book. Like, it's not scary. It talks about Arctic circles for your boundaries. It was definitely a flat earth book. It talks about endless seas, the earth's edge. Here's another quote. World old the saying that it is easier to govern others than oneself, and all that men should govern themselves as nations needs that all men be better and wiser than the wisest of one-man rulers. But in no stable democracy do men govern themselves. Though an army be all volunteers, martial law must prevail. Delegate your power, your league mortals must. The hazard you must stand, and though, unlike King Bello of Dominora, your great chieftain, sovereign kings may not declare war of himself. Nevertheless, he has done still more an imperial thing and gone to war without declaring intentions. You yourselves were precipitated upon a neighboring nation ere you only knew your spears were in your hand. But as in the stars you have written on the welkin, sovereign kings, you are a great and glorious people, and verily yours is the best and happiest land under the sun. But not wholly because you, in your wisdom, decreed it. Your origin and geography necessitated it, nor in their germ are all your blessings to be ascribed to the noble sires, who of your fought in your behalf, sovereign kings. Your nation enjoyed no little independence before your declaration declared it. Your ancient pilgrims fathered your liberty, and your wild woods harbored the nursling. for the state that today is made up of slaves cannot tomorrow transmute her bonds into free. Though lawlessness may transform them into brutes, freedom is the name for a thing that is not freedom. This a lesson never learned in an hour or an age, but by some tribes it will never be learned. Yet, if it please you, there may be such a thing as being free under Caesar. Ages ago there were as many vital freemen as breathe vital air today. Names make not distinctions. Some despots rule without swaying scepters. Though King Bello's palace was not put together by yoked men, your federal temple of freedom, sovereign kings, was the handiwork of slaves. Here's another direct quote. Each age thinks its own eternal, but through the 512 moons, all Romara, by courtesy of history, was Republican. Yet at last her terrible king tigers came and spotted themselves with gore. And time was when Dominora was Republican. Down to her sturdy backbone, the son of an absolute monarch became the man Calorus, and his crown and his head both rolled in the dust. And Dominora had her patriots by thousands, and lusty defenses and glorious Areopagitas were written, not since surpassed, and no turban was doffed save in the homage of Oro. Yet may it please you, to the sound of the pipe and tabor, the second King Carolus returned in good time, and was hailed gracious majesty by high and low. That's another quote. And it may please you, you are free, partly because you're young. Your nation is like a fine, florid youth, full of fiery impulses, hard to restrain, his strong hand nobly championing his heart. On all sides, freely he gives, and still seeks to acquire. The breath of his nostrils is like the smoke in the spring air. Every tendon is electric with generous resolves. The oppressor he defies to his beard. The high walls of old opinions he scales with a bound. In the future he sees all the domes of the east. But years elapse, and this bold boy is transformed. His eyes open not of yore, his heart is shut up as a vice. He yields not a groat, and seeking no more acquisitions, is only bent on preserving his hoard. The maxims once trampled underfoot are now printed on his front, and he who hates oppressors is become an oppressor himself. Thus often with men, thus often with nations. Then marvel not, sovereign kings, that old states are different from yours, and think not your own must forever remain liberal as now. Each age thinks its own eternal, but through the 512 moons, all Ramona, by courtesy of history, was Republican. How about this one? The grand error of this age, sovereign kings, is the general supposition that the very special diabolus is abroad, whereas the very special diabolus has been abroad ever since Mardi began. And the grand error of your nation's sovereign king seems this: the conceit that Mardi is now in the last scene of the last act of her drama, and that all preceding events were ordained to bring about the catastrophe you believe to be at hand, a universal and permanent republic. Here's another quote. Every hour new cries startle the air. Hurrah! Another kingdom is burned down to the earth's edge. Another demigod is unhelmed. Another republic is dawning. Shake hands, freemen, shake hands. Soon we will hear of Dominors down in the dust of a hapless veranda, free as ourselves. All Porphyro's volcanoes are bursting. Who may withstand the people? The times of terrible tales to tyrants. Ere we die, freemen, all Mardi will be free. How about there's not so much freedom here as these freemen think, said Babbalanja, turning. I laugh and admire. I can keep going, but this is going to be really long because I wanted to read quite a bit of these quotes to you. Now, one of these islands has a king, King Abaraza, and it's a fictional character that rules over the Polynesian-inspired land of island of Juam, Juam, and it serves as a foil to the novel's main character, King Media, who's engaging in deep, sometimes cynical debates with travelers. King Abraza is known for throwing lavish banquets, hosting leisurely discussions on his turf. He loves to be entertained, but is highly skeptical of radical, philosophical, and profound truths. The king frequently clashes with Babbalanja, who's a philosopher in the traveling party. He often speaks through his erratic alter ego, which is Asageti, while Babbalanja searches for the meaning of absolute truth. King Abraza represents the comfortable aristocratic complacency. King Abraza dismisses Babbalanja's deep musings as gibberish. I learned a word, sultanic, meaning something that belongs to sultan, which is an Islamic sovereign, is a sultan. Methinks, Babbalanja, your savor of the mysterious parchment in Vivenza read, yes, philosopher, these are the men who toppled castles to make way for hovels. These, they who fought for freedom, but find it despotism to rule themselves. These, Babbalanja, are the race to whom a tyrant would prove a blessing, and so they drained his cup. My lord, the last sentiment decides the authorship of the scroll, but with deference, tyrants seldom can prove blessings, inasmuch an evil seldom eventuates in a good. Yet will these people soon have a tyrant over them, if they long cleave to war. Of many javelins one must prove a scepter, of many helmets one of a crown. It is but in the wearing. Refill, my lord. Fools, fools, cried Medina, the tribes hate us kings, yet know not that peace is war against all kings. We seldom are undone by spheres, which are ministers. This wine is strong. Now the time in his cup the king craft from a king. Aye, aye, my lord, your royal order will endure so long as men will fight. Break the spears, free the nations. Kings reap the harvest that wave on the battlefields. You oft you kings do snatch the aloe flower, whose so blossoming mankind watches for 100 years. Say on, my lord. Sailing from the south of Vienna, not far from the coast, they passed a cluster of islands green as new fledged grass, like the mouth of floating cornucopias. They margined brimmed over upon the brine with flowers. Some grew stately roses, on others stood twin pillars, across others tri-hued rainbows rested. Oh, one of my favorite chapters was called A Scene in the Land of Warwicks or Kingmakers. So, okay, so Dominora was the British Empire. Then there's an island called Porphyroa, which is a continent, large landmass within Mardi, torn by revolution and political rebellions. There's Hulumulu, which is an island populated entirely by disabled people, I'm pretty sure. Society's physical and social outcasts. There's an island called Juana, an island torn between the influences of church and state. Serenia, which is an egalitarian utopian society based on reason and universal brotherhood. An island called Flozella, which is the final stop, governed by a seductive Queen Hautaya, where the quest for Yilla concludes. There's an island called Valapi, a land of storytellers and poets known for songs. Island of Dwam, an island representing sensual indulgence and hedonism. Uhunu is an island inhabited by political outlaws and societal exiles. Mondolodo is a land defined by excessive feasting and materialism. Maramama is a highly structured religious center of Mardi, ruled by the pontiff Hivohiti, an island called Padula, where a wealthy industrial island occupied by merchants and trailers, and Vivenza, which is the grand satirical representation of the United States, consisting of territories like Canadita, gold mines, in the story, King Media, Babylanja, Mohi, and Yumi sent on a satirical quest across the imaginary Pacific archipelago. The party wanders in search of Yilla, and their island hopping, sprawling is a journey which critiques human history, philosophical religion. The primary islands also include Odo, which is the domain of King Media, which is the home base for the voyage. Babylanja is a particularly fascinating, complex character, fiercely intellectual. He quotes teachings of ancient philosophers Bardania. However, rational thoughts are famously interrupted by his possession of Asageti, a chatty, unruly, mischievous devil inside of him. Asageti allows Babylanja to voice cynical and humorous truths that his former philosophical self might have otherwise suppressed. Here's a quote. Superadded to the paternal interest which Bello betrayed in the concerns of King Porphyro, according to our chronicler, he also manifested no less interest in those of the remotest islands. Indeed, he found a rich country inhabited by people deemed by him barbarous, incapable of wise legislation. He sometimes relieved them from political anxieties by assuming dictatorship over them. And if incensed at his conduct, they flew to their spears, they were accounted rebels and treated accordingly. But as old Mohi very truly observed herein, Bela was not alone, for throughout Mardi all strong nations as well as strong men love to govern the weak, and those who most taunted King Bello for his political rapacity were open to the very same charge. So with Vienza, a distant island at times, very loud in denunciations of Bello, and a great national brigade, not yet wholly extinct in Vivenza, were its aboriginal people, a race of wild hunters, Nimrods, who year by year were driven further and further into the remoteness, till, as one of their sad warriors said, after continual removes along the log, his race was on the point of being remorsefully pushed off the end. Now Bello was a great geographer, land surveyor, and gauger of the seas. I mean, it's good. I also learned about mermaids and mermen. How about that? Neptune knows all. Crocodiles, sharks, griffins, gulls, orgs, winged walruses, finned lions, griffins, metal lions, masks, shellwork. So I spent a lot of time, and you can see, like, there's so much there. Let me find one more. The tripod. Okay, hold on. The mystic fan with which Unja fanned himself when in trouble, woven from the leaves of the water lily. A tripod of stork's legs supporting a nautilus shell containing the fragments of a bird's egg, into which was said to have been magically decanted the soul of a deceased chief, unfortunately crushed in the atmospheric pressure. Two clasped right hands embalmed, being those of twin warriors who had thus died on a battlefield, impossible to surrender. A curious pouch or purse formed from the skin of the albatross foot and decorated with three sharp claws naturally pertaining to it, originally the property of the notorious Old Tooth per Tooth, a long tangled lock of mermaid's hair, much resembling the curling silky fibers of the finer seaweed preserved between the fins of dolphins. A mermaid's comb for the toilet, the stiff serrated crest of a Cook's storm petrel. O was particularly curious concerning mermaids. Files, wraps, and pincers, all bones, the implements of an emirate chiropedist who flourished his tools before the flood. Owing to the excessive unevenness of the surface in those times, the diluvians were particularly liable to pedal affections. The back tooth, that Zozo the enthusiast, in token of grief, recklessly knocked out at the decease of a friend, worn to a stump and quite useless. There was, like, in this journey, there was people that thought they were descendants from kangaroos. I am braid beard, I am a lobster mackerel, anything you please, but my ancestors were kangaroos, not monkeys. Old Bodo erroneously opined. My idea is more susceptible of demonstration than his. Among the deepest discovery land fossils, the relics of kangaroos are discernible. No relics of men. Hence there was no giants in those days, but on the contrary, kangaroos. And those kangaroos formed the first edition of mankind. So there was a quote, smoking the Hydra, Babylonia. So these people were traveling around mystical islands, imagine, like, made up, but meant to represent places. So I got some Mother's Day and Memorial Day stuff in here, in between here. I guess when they pulled up to Vivenza, which meant the United States, there was an inscription. The canoes draw near. Okay. Open temple of canes containing one image, that of a helmeted female, the tutelar deity of Vivenza. Canoes draw near. Lo, what is inscription that's chiseled on the arch? Studying those immense hieroglyphics a while, antiquarian Mohai eyed them and said slowly, "In this republican land, all men are born free and equal." "False," said Medina. "And how long stay they so?" said Babbalanja. "But look, lower old man," cried Medina, "methinks there's a small hieroglyphic or two hidden away at a yonder angle, and interpret them." And after much scrying of his eyes, for the characters were minute, Mohis thus spoke: "In this republican land, all men are born free and equal, except the tribe of Hamo." Well, that nullifies the rest of the first half of the sentence. "Ah, ye republicans," it seemed to have been added as a postscript, rejoined Braybeard, screwing his eyes again. "Perhaps so," said Babbalanja, "but some wag must have done it." And they shot through the arch and rapidly got to the beach, and they visited the great central temple of Vivenza. This is where Babbalanja said, "Oh, you must be one of the last of the kangaroos." But the old-fashioned pouch purse of the grandma, he says, "I take that. Must have been transferred. Nowadays, our sex carries the purse." Alright, I'm going to make another video because, like I said, this is a 22-hour book that I spent 3 weeks probably on, and I didn't want to put it down. These mythical islands represent contemporary societies, and it allowed Melville to tackle heavy moral and philosophical debates. We talked about Vivenza representing the United States, where he critiques American materialism, mobocracy, and the hypocrisy of slavery. Dominora, representing Great Britain, depicts militaristic empire reliant on naval power to maintain global supremacy. And the island of Serenia, which is an idealized utopian society embodying elements of transcendentalism, focusing on unity and divine love. The other islands, like Hulamulo and Ohono, are inhabited by the outcasts and exiles, and they were skewering how the real world deals with its vulnerable. They visited the burial place of the High Pontiffs. That's a place called Marama. The voyagers visit the great moray of Maramama, the massive sacred burial ground where the supreme religious leaders of the adjoining islands are laid to rest. Great Moria is a fictional burial place of the pontiffs, sacred, heavily wooded area filled with defaced idols and temples where the high pontiffs is interred. The island of Maramama is dominated by rigid priestly caste who control the populace and exact tribute from surrounding islands. The High Pontiff is known as the supreme ruler of the religion. He dwells in secrecy, mystery, largely detached from day-to-day lives of the common people. It had sacred peaks where pilgrims travel to Maramana to seek the blessings and climb to the island's holy peaks. Through this quest often proves perilous or fruitless. On the island, holy figures and artifacts are peddled by craftsmen. A satirical blend of capitalism and religious idols. There was, I think, over 100 chapters. The center of many circumferences. They visit the tributary islands. How Donatello sent agents in the scamps of Plugi. Rare sport at Obanolo. Taji allowed his henchmen to remain on the island. We have old Lambert rubbing his jolly abdomen in paradise. Now, this fact is not being rated as a demigod, perhaps ascribable circumstances that Borobolo comported himself with less dignity than was the wont of the Mardian magisties, and truth to say, we have seen him regaling him with one of his favorite cuttlefish and a sneaking arms of feelers instinctively twinkling around his head as he ate. Few intelligent observers would have opined that the individual before them was the sovereign lord of Mondolo. But with the banquet of fish, shall we tell how the old king ungirdled himself thereto, and how the feast waxed toward its close, with one sad exception. He still remained sunny side all around, with his disk of a face of the joyous of the south side of Madeira in the hilarious season of grapes. I felt like it was probably some humor that I didn't even get, and I want to do it again, but I don't want to spend more time on it this month. How about this quote? Ye kings, ye men, where are your vouchers? I do reject your brotherhood, ye libelous. The Mexican House of the Sun, that's a quote in there. Also, Nero's House of Gold, Parthenon, Solomon's Temple. These depictions represent human ambition and the significant architectural achievement of the islands. Juam, Juam, is ruled by the King Donatello. It's a strict sacred law that forbids Donatello from ever setting foot outside of his domain. And to keep him from breaking his decree, his realm is to be made a microcosm of entertainment, so he never feels the need to leave. The island of Juam, its colorful residents, serve as a satirical tool to critique political and social issues of the era. There's another quote. Hate is a thankless thing, so let us only hate hatred, and once give love play. Love is a delight, but hate a torment. about fratricidal hate. Many ages ago, there reigned in Guam a king called Te. This Te succession into the sovereignty was long disputed by his brother Majora, who at the last, rallying around him an army after many vicissitudes, defeated the unfortunate monarch in a stout fight of clubs on the beach. In those days, Willamilla, during a certain period of the year, was at a place set apart for royal games and diversions, and was furnished with suitable accommodations for king and court. From peculiar positions, moreover, it was regarded as the last stronghold of the Guam monarchy. Melville, often recognized as an ardent Democrat, expressed deep skepticism regarding American politicians and the limits of the Republican Brotherhood. Rather than praising the United States as an unblemished utopian model of liberty, he critiqued its rampant materialism, windy congressional speeches, and the expansion of democracy at the expense of human rights. Melville satires the American democratic experiment. He targets the country's hypocrisy, specifically the juxtaposition of the founding ideals against the institution of slavery, in a section of the book featuring an allegorical continent named Vivenza. In the Vivenza chapters, Melville's narrator visits the American coded region and discovers the official motto declaring that all men are born free and equal. However, the Democratic travelers notice the second piece of graffiti scrawled beneath it, reading, "Except the tribe of Homo," which highlights the grim reality that Americans' democratic claims did not apply to the enslaved people. At the climax of the novel, the philosophical travelers reach the boundary of the known world. Taji suddenly breaks the helm and declares himself an unreturning wanderer, and he sails out into the open, endless ocean. And the three fixed specters of the shadow plunge right into the white wake of his final eternal chase. The three sons stalk Taji's sheep in a canoe. The collective component of the shadow acts as a symbol of universal guilt. The literary analysis, shadow represents the darker side of the human psyche, avenging specters that materialize every time Taj tries to enjoy the peace brought by his idealized, dreamlike lover. The shadow refers to the three avenging sons of the slain priest Alma for their ghostly presence. They relentlessly pursue the narrator across the fictional Polynesian archipelago for abducting their ethereal maiden Yila and killing the father. There was a lot of, oh my god, there was just so much. I learned a lot about fish. I learned a lot about sharks. I learned about different types of sharks. I learned about bioluminescent creatures. Strange fish. They live all day long. I learned about the ritualistic murder of an old priest. Yila mysteriously disappeared from her bower in the valley of Odo. And after the narrator, who named herself Taji, rescues her by murdering her priestly keeper, he suddenly vanishes and sparks the endless allegorical quest across the archipelago to find her. The ritualistic murder of the old priest was to save Yila, symbolized a fall from grace. His search across these seas is constantly pursued by the emissaries of Queen Hautia, which is an allegorical figure representing dark, sensual temptations. Hila was a mysterious maiden, beautiful, innocent, fair skin, who was rescued by the narrator, falls in love with her.